Welcome to Uncloaked Illusions. I'm Chris Anthony, and I was reading a couple of articles today, and kind of correlates with each other, and I wanted to give a little perspective on these articles, and it has to do with the spending and the expansion of the military, the U.S. military. One of the articles is titled "Huge Military Budgets Make Us Broke, Not Safe." And a couple of excerpts from this article. We're now spending more on the military adjusted for inflation than at any time since World War II, including during the Reagan and George W. Bush buildups. We spend more than the next 8 countries put together. Worse still, the military can't even say what it's actually spending. It's still the only federal agency that can't pass an audit. The brass says they'll really try this year, but I'll believe it when I see it. Trusting the Pentagon to rein in on its waste hasn't worked, but back in 2015, the Pentagon's own commission report found $125 billion in administrative waste that could be cut over 5 years, but then they simply buried the report. Okay, I'm going to go on and bypass a couple of the sections. Instead, in addition to firing off scary tweets, Trump repeatedly calls in his State of the Union to modernize and rebuild our nuclear arsenal to the tune of $1.7 trillion. Why? The 4,000 nukes we currently have enough to destroy the entire planet seem like an inadequate deterrent. Leaders are meanwhile working on designs for new lower yields nukes, envisioning them as tools for limited nuclear war. That makes nuclear war seem more feasible and therefore more likely. Feeling safer yet? Okay, now before I even go on, which I don't even think it's necessary to go on, let's look at what they are proposing here. They are proposing to minimize nuclear attacks and nuclear tactics to be able to utilize nuclear warfare. And mind you, if you recall, back in 2001, I believe, literally maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so before the 9/11 attack, the Pentagon couldn't account for like $4 trillion. Just literally came up missing virtually. So this is what's going on with the spending of our Pentagon and our government. And I was about to say, I hope it's not doing what I think it's gonna do. But I could bypass this right here. Excuse me, that just seems to happen. Okay, another. Congress keeps funding a war machine that the public should divest from. Excerpts in recent budget negotiations, Senate Democrats agreed to boast in military spending that exceeded the cap for fiscal 2018 by $70 billion, bringing a total request to an enormous $716 billion. Inevitably, this means more Pentagon contracts will be awarded to private corporations that use endless war to line their pockets. Democrats capitulated to the massive increase without so much as a scuffle, but the move hardly comes as a surprise given how much money flows from weapons makers to the coffers of congressional campaigns for both parties. Now, okay, let's think about this. It also points out that the majority of weapons money goes to the Republicans. Democrat senators like Tim Kaine and Bill Nelson appear in the top 10 recipients of campaign contributions in both chambers and parties from military contractors in 2017 and 2018. Now, the Democrats literally receive over 785,000. And Hillary Clinton took over $1 million from the industry in 2016. Even progressive darlings like Elizabeth Warren, the so-called Indian, a native, I'll say, and Bernie Sanders, again, socialists, take money from weapons manufacturers. And Sanders supports Boeing's disastrous F-35 because his home state had a financial stake in the program. Again, this is people on the Senate. This is people in Congress. They are literally pushing for war, but they're trying to do it in a subtle way. The Democrats at one point, you would suppose, were for anti-war. They were against it. And again, under the table and behind closed doors, they're making deals to support the weapons makers. And again, the coffers of the congressional campaigns, and this is what we're dealing with. But what's very unusual about this is, as I've mentioned before, if I've ever mentioned it, that the United States doesn't really produce anything but weapons, war, trash, and pornography. Thus the reason other countries are moving completely away from the United States, because it doesn't produce anything. And if you don't fall in line with their request, then you suddenly have a coup occurring in your country. And yeah, we're losing power in that area as well, where we can't pull these coups off anymore. But that's also something to keep in mind. Is think about the whole correlation between the Pentagon just mysteriously losing $4 to $6 trillion in 2001, right before 9/11. And then suddenly 9/11, these terrorist attacks took place. And the last article that I'm going to read excerpts from is Bringing Humankind Closer to Annihilation, which this one is very important. World leaders denounce Trump's new nuclear posture. Now, before I even read some of the excerpts, Trump has been pretty much pointing out that he wanted to expand the military, and he wants to put a great deal of funding into the military's expansion, and also its upgrading. Because we do know under the Obama administration and even the Bush administration, the military had become weakened and futile almost, in a sense. Okay, the public has a right to distrust Trump with nuclear weapons, and we all need to speak up and oppose these new dangerous policies. As the Chinese government on Saturday urged the U.S. government to drop its Cold War mentality and criticize the Trump administration's new nuclear weapons posture, released Friday, other world leaders also expressed alarm that the new policy for expanded development of smaller atomic weapons and reduced restrictions on their use was leading humankind closer to annihilation. And I agree. Without even having to read certain excerpts from this particular article, China is not trying to take over the global stage by force. You know, they're actually offering the countries infrastructure. They're offering the countries business that will actually ensure the country's growth economically. And we, on the other hand, we can't offer this. Beijing expressed alarm over how the U.S. characterized the Chinese military buildup as it reminded the world that nuclear weapons should not be considered first strike weapons. And yes, this article does point out that, you know, this is what the United States is basically putting on the table, that nuclear strikes will be first when it comes to North Korea, at least, and maybe other countries as well that oppose it. China has always exercised the utmost restraint in the development of nuclear weapons and limited its nuclear capabilities to the minimum level required for national security, said Ren Wuquang, a spokesperson of the Chinese Defense Ministry, in a statement. Mind you, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. So if I'm not, and you do read the article, which I will put down in the description box, all 3 articles, so you can visit these and you can read them, and you can literally scrutinize the articles and come to your own conclusion with the articles and with the information that they provide. We hope the U.S. side will discard its Cold War mentality, shoulder its own special and primary responsibility for nuclear disarmament, understand correctly China's strategic intentions, and take a fair view on China's national defense and military development. When the Pentagon on Friday released its new nuclear posture review, the NPR, as Common Dreams reported, peace and disarmament groups in the U.S. and around the world expressed immediate alarm as the document and its implications. Who in their right mind thinks we should expand the list of scenarios in which we might launch nuclear weapons? Asked Peace Action in a statement. Who let Dr. Strangelove write the nuclear posture review? Now, I will speak on this. I do not think that, I think what Trump has done is he's given the military more power than it necessarily needs to have. You know, he is the commander in chief, and he's supposed to be the one that is in charge. But again, we do understand that, you know, certain weapons dealers and makers, and I guess we can call them deep state operatives, are pretty much in charge and have the last say when it comes to anything the military is going to perform throughout the globe. Okay, the article goes on to point out many different things. Again, as I said, I'll allow you to look into it, but I will read a couple more excerpts that I do feel is necessary. Like China, Lavrov, you know, Lavrov is the prime minister in Russia, said the change of nuclear posture by the U.S. under Trump contrasts sharply with its own, in which atomic weapons are considered as strictly a defensive deterrent, not a weapon they would consider using against a non-nuclear state or in a first strike capacity. Russia's military policy has unambiguously limited the threshold of use of nuclear weapons to 2. Let us put it bluntly, hypothetical, entirely defensive scenarios, Lavrov stated. Okay, meaning this is the last stage or the last straw where a country is realizing that it is being pushed back and defeated militarily, that this would be like a hypothetical scenario and not something that one would even consider realistically. They are follows. Okay, yeah. They are as follows. In a response and an act of aggression against Russia and or against our allies if nuclear or other types of mass destruction weapons are used. And also that is the second scenario with use of a conventional arms, but only in case our state's very existence would be in danger. Yeah, this is interesting. This article, John Quoley, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. John Quoley produced this article. The article "Congress Keeps Funding a War Machine" is Benjamin. It's Medu. Okay, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Medu Benjamin and Elliot Swan. And the other article that I read, which was "Huge Military Budgets Make Us Broke," Miriam Pemberton. Okay, so I'm gonna have these articles in the description box. And what do you think? We have this build up militarily, as if they're getting ready for something. You know, we also have a lot of things going on that's not being reported, like the stock market has literally been like dropping thousands of points for the past few days, and nobody's really reporting on it. You'll report on it when it becomes very dangerous and people start to actually worry about it. Then you'll see it in CNN and maybe MSNBC, Fox News, whatever the case may be. Right now, we're worried about the most ridiculous news when it comes to reporting. Reporting has literally fallen from grace a long time ago. And also, what do you think about this misallocation of the funds, these billions of dollars that the Pentagon is trying to exact and trying to get and trying to implement in the fiscal 2018 year? This is ridiculous. Again, this country is broke. This highlights the fact that, you know, how can you fund a perpetual war when you are broke, when you are literally insolvent? And for those who may be a little confused about it, may even be oblivious of it, the more money they print, which is what they're going to do, you know, to create more liquidity to hold up and prop up the stock markets, the less that money is worth, the more inflation you're going to see. So again, we are in the makings of Venezuela. We are in the makings. Look, give me your opinion about this, your comments, like, subscribe. Please hit that notification button so when I do put a video out, you guys will be notified and you guys will be able to get the little ding 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 thing going on. And let's share the video. Let's get some perspective about what's going on with our congressional caucus in a sense, and the spending that they do, and why we as Americans, infrastructure wise, job wise, have absolutely nothing to show for it. I actually like this little area. I might consider doing it down here for the most part, the living room area. I am Chris Anthony, and yeah, I have, again, some things coming up, a blog talk radio show, still in the processes of it, but it is in the finalization stage. It's just in my city, Mardi Gras is happening, so it kind of puts a halt on a great deal of things. Also, my blog, I'm going to be upgrading and updating it. And what's going to happen is the conversations or the commentary that I do offer is going to be linked to these particular stories, and you can always visit my blog to check it out. And we just have a lot of things going. I'm going to have some flyers going around. I'm going to basically get in the political realm as much as I possibly can without being corrupted. So I may just be that voice that's kind of screaming from the outside to how corrupt the political platform in America has become. I'm Chris Anthony, and I'm out.